For millions of people across India, rice is an absolute non-negotiable daily necessity. But this deep-rooted dietary tradition is colliding head-on with a rapidly surging diabetes epidemic. The biological vulnerability starts at the mill. To produce plain white rice, the grain's protective outer layers, the bran and the germ, are completely stripped away, leaving the core totally exposed. What's left behind is almost pure amylopectin. Because this highly branched starch lacks any fiber armor, your digestive enzymes can tear those branches apart instantly, turning the solid grain into liquid sugar. If we track a subject eating a bowl of fresh, hot white rice, we see that liquid sugar immediately flood the bloodstream. It slams the pancreas and triggers a massive, sudden insulin spike. For a modern, insulin-resistant metabolism, eating a plate of plain white rice triggers the exact same biological response as eating a bowl of table sugar. The standard medical advice for this problem is highly predictable: switch to whole grain brown rice. This chart compares the glycemic index scale of both grains. White rice sits high at an approximate value of 72. Brown rice comes in slightly lower at 50. While that number is lower, the fiber in brown rice is intrinsic. It's trapped permanently inside the grain itself. And for someone who is severely insulin resistant, that internal barrier simply fails to hold back the glucose. Eating brown rice does not prevent pancreatic trauma. It merely delays the exact same violent sugar spike by about 15 minutes. If the most common alternative fails, millions of diabetics are left wondering if they have to abandon their cultural staple entirely. But saving your pancreas does not require banning rice. You have to manipulate how the starch is prepared and precisely when it enters your stomach. To see the first mechanical solution in action, we'll track subject B. They cook a standard batch of white rice, but instead of eating it hot, they place it directly into the refrigerator for 12 to 24 hours. Inside that cold environment, a chemical biohack known as starch retrogradation takes over. The temperature drop forces the amylopectin molecules to realign. They bond into a dense, interlocking matrix called resistant starch type 3. This rigid structure acts as molecular armor, highly resistant to the digestive enzymes that normally break down carbohydrates. Crucially, this chemical armor does not melt away when you reheat the rice the next day for dinner. A simple temperature drop forces the starch into a completely different chemical identity, effectively disarming the instant sugar trap before the food ever reaches the plate. But chemistry is only half the strategy. When it's time to eat, Subject B follows Professor Stickman's golden rule: never eat naked carbs. Before taking a single bite of the reheated rice, they consume foods rich in fat and protein, like ghee, dal, or fibrous vegetables. Inside the stomach, this food sequence acts as a biological primer. It builds a thick fat and protein wall that coats the gastric lining. When the rice finally arrives, it lands directly into this physical barrier. The wall mechanically traps the carbohydrates, drastically slowing down the rate at which glucose can exit the stomach and enter the bloodstream. By deploying this buffer first, you dictate the terms of your digestion. You force the body to process the energy slowly, rather than letting unprotected carbohydrates overwhelm your nervous system. If we put our two subjects side by side, the biological outcomes of these hacks are clear. This chart tracks their blood glucose in real time. On the left, Subject A's fresh, unprotected rice floods their system. The line shoots nearly vertical into a red zone, forcing a panicked, dangerous insulin response from the pancreas. On the right, Subject B's retrograded starch and protein wall restrict that glucose to a gentle trickle. Instead of a violent spike, we get a slow, manageable sugar slope that stays comfortably in the green. And because that resistant starch couldn't be broken down, it bypasses the small intestine entirely. It travels down to the lower gut, where it acts as fuel for your beneficial bacteria. Managing diabetes does not mean you have to surrender your cultural staples. If you master the molecular chemistry of the grain and the mechanical buffering of your stomach, you can safely put white rice back on the table.
Thanks for watching Body Science School. Please like, share, and subscribe the channel for more.